So the
King.
Bulls just traded for Zach Lavine, which has been much anticipated since I believe like the Stone Age. I believe we've been talking about a Zach Lavine trade since I started doing my channel. Uh, like one of ironically, the Zach Lavine to the Chicago Bulls trade for Jimmy Butler happened when I was in my first year of doing this job. Actually, the my reaction and what do the Bulls do going forward video was one of my best performing videos at that time. So I actually was very happy about this deal when it went down. Zach Lavine was a player that I bought into quite a bit. I believed that he could be the foundational star to build upon for this team because he was super athletic, super strong 3-point shooter. Now, my perspective on basketball in 2017 was a little bit, or 2017, was it more like 2018? I don't know. It was a little bit ignorant. I won't lie to you. I was talking about basketball well before I had any business talking about basketball. But I did like Zach. I also liked Chris Dunn. And I thought Lauri Markkanen could be really, really interesting. That trade went the way that it did, and the last couple of years, Zach Lavine has just kind of been on the Bulls after the DeMar, Lonzo, Vooch, Caruso era came to a close, which that era lasted a couple of months, and then they just perpetually held on to the idea of it for 2 years. Eventually, Zach Lavine had to be traded. And the perception around Zach around the league changed rather dramatically when he got handed the Supermax contract that he was given thanks to that brief era of success. The thing about getting paid in the NBA is it is a double-edged sword. Now, one edge of that sword is $100+ million, so you'll take it. But the other edge is you now have the expectation of performing like $100 million athlete, and that is a standard that is hard to hold up to be honest. It is a threshold that I don't know that Zach was ever really going to prove to be worth. He did, peak as like a top 20-ish, maybe 25th best player in the NBA, managed to make 2 all-star teams as a result of it. But by the time that this trade went down, because of the money that he was making, he wasn't really worth all that much. That was the perception in the offseason, so Zach did not get dealt. And then this season, Zach has been awesome. Zach has been on a tear. He's been one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA. He's also played more off ball than he ever has before, which I super appreciate because I think one of the larger problems with Zach Lavine is that his offensive capability is so often wasted as a ball handler when that is not his strength. However, I am not surprised at all that the Bulls got almost nothing for Zach Lavine. So the return they got was Trey Jones, Zach Collins, and Kevin Huerter, as well as their own 2025 pick back. Now, the 2025 pick was top 10 protected. It's actually not guaranteed that the Bulls will be in the top 10 because the Eastern Conference is so bad that they might end up in the play-in anyways, and even if they lose the play-in, they'll still be towards the tail end of the lottery. The Raptors just got Brandon Ingram, so they might jump up the win columns, maybe, but the Hawks just traded Bogdanovich and Kevin Hunter, DeAndre Hunter. So the Hawks are going to get worse. The Bulls seem to want to maintain competitive. That's what AK said. They kept Vucevic. They kept Lonzo. They kept Kobe White. So the Bulls are not going to get a guaranteed top 10 pick. So getting that pick back isn't actually nothing. I also think Trey Jones is a pretty good point guard. The Bulls have $1 million, but hey, Trey Jones is a pretty good NBA player. Kevin Huerter could be a pretty good NBA player. His 3-point shot fell off, and that made everything else about him not really worth it. So we'll have to see if he can return to his previous form. But at least there is 1.5 good NBA players in this deal. Zach Collins fucking sucks. I hate Zach Collins. He's one of the worst players in the NBA as far as I'm concerned. The Spurs are blessed to have him off of their roster. But overall, super underwhelming package for a guy who's averaging 24 points per game on above average league efficiency and is statistically like a top 5 3-point shooter in the league, both in catch and shoot, off of the dribble, whatever kind of three you want. Zach LaVine's one of the best in the world at it. But there is a cycle with Zach LaVine. There has always been a cycle with Zach LaVine that if you have followed me for a while, you've seen me fall for it. And that is, he gets really hot shooting the ball for quite a while. And then you go, who cares about his other weaknesses? Who cares that he's not a good defender? Who cares that he's not a good playmaker? Who cares that he can be a black hole on offense? Who cares that he gets serious tunnel vision in the clutch? Who cares that he's not clutch? Period. He's just not very good in clutch time more often than not. What you can do to mitigate that is shoot the ball good as fuck. And Zach LaVine is very capable of doing that with regularity. But he is also pretty streaky. He's not the first guy I think of in the category of streaky, but he's definitely streaky. And thus far, very limited sample size. But I saw a clip of Malik Monk talking about Zach LaVine on the Kings, and they were like, what do you think of Zach LaVine thus far being his teammate? And he's like, why can't he shoot anymore? I thought this guy could shoot. The threes aren't going in. And he's like, it'll be fine. He'll figure it out. And he will. Zach LaVine will figure it out. He'll shoot the three ball well again. But this aspect of his game, he is too reliant on the whims of his jump shooting to entirely define his value as a basketball player. If your value is entirely determined by something that can just be off on any given night, that's a problem. The average shooter in the NBA right now is not somebody who is just pretty much limited to that. Zach's not limited to that just in terms of scoring the ball, because he can also attack off of the catch. He at least has a competent handle, even if he can over dribble. But one way or the other, for a $50 million a year player, you can shoot the piss out the ball well. You can average 24 points per game on a team that, let's face it, doesn't have that many options to take scoring away from you. So you're not going to get a lot for him. You're just not. And I've seen so many people going, oh man, the Bulls took a huge L on this one. And they did, but they took a huge L on this one years ago when they gave Zach that money. That wasn't going to change with him playing decent during the regular season. I didn't think Zach didn't have this in him. I didn't think Zach couldn't play pretty well this year. It doesn't matter if he plays well in the context of the Chicago Bulls, who are mid as mid gets. I think Zach can be a really strong third option on a team. However, you are not paying third option money for Zach LaVine. You are paying first option, at best second option money for the guy, and that is just unacceptable to any reasonable NBA front office, especially as the tax apron has become increasingly devastating to teams. Just taking on a player who's on a bad contract and saying, fuck it, what does it matter? Well, it does matter. Look at the goddamn Phoenix Suns. So, no, doesn't shock me in the slightest that Zach LaVine is not that valuable in the trade market. This is what was always going to happen. Everyone's going like, I'm so sorry, Kenny, and to a lesser extent because I'm way less popular, because I'm way less charismatic. Sorry, Rusty, for what has happened to the Chicago Bulls. I was sorry and sad about it a long time ago. What's happening now isn't the least bit surprising. It was like people were giving me breakup condolences a year after the relationship ended. Like, I have watched the Chicago Bulls less this year than I have ever watched them. It wasn't close because it's pointless basketball. Basketball that's not worth watching. Almost all the players on the team will not be there in the long term. And Zach Lavine could play himself up all he wanted. He was never going to bring us a good return. So, not surprised. Sorry that you were, but this is what I always expected. Like, I'm happy to listen to people tell me what they think about just about any other NBA player. I've watched Zach Lavine more than you. Okay, the odds that you have watched Zach Lavine play basketball more than me are very low. I watched every Chicago Bulls game damn near for like 4-5 years when he was on the team. I have seen more of Zach Lavine's. I've seen Zach score most of the points he did in a Bulls jersey live. And I believe he's top 5 all time in the franchise in scoring, because after Michael Jordan, the record book gets a little sad. But yeah, that's my point. I wasn't surprised. This is how it goes. Welcome to the Chicago Bulls.